So the way I approach investing, let's look at it two ways. Let's look at it pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, and then let's look at it post-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, the way I approached investing was always twofold. One was I attended, and over my 30 years experience, you can imagine, I have met many, many different developers. I've met many brokers. I've met many lenders. So I have always kept in contact with them one way or another. And now with the technology with internet, I stay in touch with them even more often. But what happens is there are times where you're going to get one of your friends in the industry that calls and says, hey, I'm looking to get rid of, a shopping center. I no longer need it. I maxed out. Are you interested in buying it? And that's one way of me initiating a conversation on a specific transaction. Another way, which is probably the most popular way across this country, are through intermediaries or brokers. Whether, if you're in New York, you have, well, anywhere in the country, you have the Cushman and Wakefield, the CBREs, the Ziff, Ackman and Ziff, you have Meridian. There are just so many to choose from, and they're always marketing real estate transactions. So that's another way. The problem for me is that means that it's saturating the marketplace. So I have to look at it very carefully to make sure and ensure that it really makes sense, because if I'm getting a package from a broker, I'm sure that the pro formas are a bit aggressive, is the best way of looking at it. And then, of course, the third way is me just driving around and looking at properties and seeing what's going on. So my approach, though, is to first decide on the location, the market, the sub-market. So, in Florida, for example, everybody and then their relatives are all looking for properties in Southeast Florida. Also Southwest Florida, Fort Myers is now becoming huge as well. So you have to immediately think, all right, I'm probably going to overpay for a property down there because it's really a hot market. And there are other markets in the US that are very similar, and they don't have to be primary markets or CBDs. They could be tertiary, but very popular. Let's use Austin, Texas as an example. So we all heard of Austin, Texas, but over the last, 7 or 8 years, it's become extremely popular. Cranes are going up. Downtown Charlotte, as they call it, uptown Charlotte, which I'll never understand. But in uptown Charlotte, they're building all over the place. So, that's my first criteria. My next criteria is the asset class. Do I care so much about what assets I like? Well, I know I like multifamily. Everyone should. I know I like self-storage. Everyone should, because they're the least risky of all real estate asset classes. Then I go up to office and retail. I would prefer retail before I go into office. That's pre-pandemic. But those are that's the next criteria for me, is the asset class. And then the third one is to take a look at numbers and make sure that it fits the criteria that I'm looking for. So if I know that I want to put $2 million into my next transaction, being the equity, then I know what size transaction I'm looking for, so I can knock off all of the others. And the reason I give you all these criteria is because if you really wanted to, you could be getting 100 deals a day to look at. And we all know, especially if you're doing underwriting at your offices, getting 100 a day to try to underwrite, even do a back of an envelope, is just too much. So that's why I break it down to those three criteria. And once I have that, then I've narrowed my search, and then I can start looking and underwriting and seeing if it makes sense for me. Are the returns there based on my own underwriting? And the first time, it's literally a back of the envelope. And I'll tell you, what I do is I just take what they've given me as the NOI, I divide it by what I believe is the market's cap rate, and it gives me a value. And then I have to just figure out if I think that value is there. And that's my first knee jerk reaction. And if I think it's just way out of the ballpark, it's gone.